Proposal in Boston, Massachusetts would force landlords to sell their properties to their tenants. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over a topic that I have covered before, and it's the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, right? So basically what this does is it gives tenants the first right of refusal when a landlord is selling a property. So in places where this sort of thing is put in place, landlord wants to sell their property, right? Let's say for $1 million, right? Well, the tenant would be the first one who has the opportunity to buy it, right? Darn any seller or buyer that the landlord already had lined up. Nope, doesn't matter. You know, the tenant has all the rights and the property owner does not have any rights. So obviously I'm not in favor of this sort of law, and I've made that very clear the few other times that I've covered this topic. So now they're trying to get something like this passed up in Boston, and obviously one of the biggest issues we have with it is that, hey, it takes too long to get these transactions done. Not only does it take too long, but it also, forces the landlord into a position where they might not get the best deal possible, and they can't sell the property to who they want to sell it to. So yeah, it's really taken away property owners' rights. And I don't like to see any law or rule or regulation that takes away property rights from anyone. That's what our whole country is based upon. But the worst part of all of it is, right, it's pushing towards this socialist system where they don't have private landlords, they don't have private property owners anymore, but now the government or nonprofits that are essentially functioning as the government are the only ones who can own property. That's ridiculous. I absolutely hate this garbage, and I hope it never passes. Who knows though? Who knows? I know for a fact that Washington, D.C. already has a system like this, and I believe there's some places in California where there's a similar system. So it's possible that this sort of thing can spread, especially in these very far left-leaning progressive places that are basically pushing hardcore socialism, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? What do you think of this Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, where the tenants have the first right of refusal whenever a landlord is trying to sell their property? Do you think this is a good idea, or do you think this is a bad idea? Do you think this is a great way to preserve affordable housing, or do you actually think that this is going to make things worse? And it's obvious that, to me, this is actually going to make things worse. And I'll tell you why as we go through this article. So this article is coming from WGBH.org, and it says, Massachusetts renters are fighting for the right to buy their buildings. Competition for housing has driven up home prices to record levels across Massachusetts. Some of the biggest gains have happened in communities where residents can least afford to pay more. GBH News is exploring the impact in the series Priced Out: The Fight for Housing in Massachusetts. So this article, it's a very, pro-tenant, anti-landlord type thing, right? So they go through this huge sob story. I'm going to go through a little bit of this story and let you know what I think, but I'm not going to read the entire thing because, it's just too much pro-tenant garbage. So let's get into it. Yadin Zhao found out from a neighbor in June that the rundown Chinatown row house where she rents an apartment was up for sale, and she would likely be evicted. Her neighbors recommended she seek help from the nonprofit Chinatown Community Land Trust. The group rushed to tour the building and then offered more than $1 million to buy it. More, they believed, than other bidders were offering. But it was to no avail. The same day, the landlord accepted a bid on the building from a private buyer for $1.1 million cash. And now, Zhao waits for an eviction from the one-bedroom apartment she shared with her husband and 3 children for a decade. So yeah, immediately, we go straight into this tenant story. It's not an uncommon story at all. When a real estate investor buys a building, they often pay quite a bit more than what the previous owner paid for it. So, keeping that in mind, they have a loan. The majority of landlords have loans on their properties, okay? I read the stats. I believe it's 60% have a mortgage on their properties, right? And so in order to pay that loan back, we might have to raise the rents based on this new higher price that we paid. So when a property is sold, it's very likely that the new landlord's going to raise the rents. This is very, very common, and a lot of people, they don't understand why. They're like, well, nothing has changed, no improvements have been made. Yeah, but the property's sold, right? And the landlord can't pay the mortgage based on your old rent. Okay. For 5 years, housing advocates have been trying to eliminate this kind of quick turnaround sale through passage of legislation called the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. That proposal would require landlords to notify tenants of their intent to sell and give them 30 days to make a bid for the building. If they could not manage the purchase on their own, they could designate a community organization to buy it. Had this law been in effect, Zhao told GBH News through an interpreter, the landlord would have had to come to us and we'd have known he was selling instead of finding out afterward. Lydia Lowe, executive director of the Chinatown Community Land Trust, said the sale of Zhao's building demonstrates why community groups need to be empowered to compete to buy rental properties in Boston. No, I disagree, okay? Community groups don't need to have any power to purchase a building for any, basically what they're saying is, oh, well, these community groups need special rights that no one else has to buy these properties. If they want these properties so bad, why don't they bid for them alongside the other buyers, okay? That's what they have to do. If they think this is so important, they're going to have to spend over asking price, a lot over asking price to beat out these buyers. They cannot expect to come in here, and bid underneath what the market is dictating the price of that property is and win and then turn it into affordable housing. I mean, even then it doesn't even make sense. So let's think about this for a second, okay? A nonprofit buys a building for $1 million, just as an example, right? And the rents don't support that much. They don't support $1 million thing, right? So where's the? Somebody has to make up the difference. How is the nonprofit paying the mortgage? Because these nonprofits are getting mortgages on these properties as well. So how are they making up the difference? And that's where the government steps in, okay? The government steps in and says, hey, we're going to basically subsidize these people's housing and just shuffle this money towards the nonprofit. So then you ask yourself, well, where is the government getting this money? And it's your tax dollars, okay? So basically, they're taxing you, giving that money to this nonprofit to allow these people to live for cheaper than they should be able to live. So basically, these people are living in government subsidized housing, and that's where the socialism comes from, okay? This is basically a nonprofit acting on behalf of the government in order to provide socialized housing, okay? And that's not the way that things are supposed to be run. Oh, goodness. And the ridiculousness of this whole situation is that not only that, but the money that the nonprofit is using to actually purchase the building is probably from the government as well. So no matter what happens, it's your tax dollars going out so that you can make sure that these people never have to pay a penny more in rent. Is there anybody who's concerned about how much you're paying in rent or how much your mortgage is? No, there's not. Okay? Basically, you're going to be covering for these people to be, living for cheap for the rest of their lives. That's what this whole thing boils down to. We had hoped that we could buy it and explain to the owner that if he sold to us, we would buy it as is and work to keep the tenants in place, she said, and that he might have a feeling about helping to stabilize the community. The landlord didn't respond to calls for comment. Yeah, why would the landlord, okay? You offered $100,000 less than the winning offer. Now, yeah, I want to help people as much as anyone else, right? But $100,000 is a lot of money to just turn down to help people. No, I'm not doing it, okay? Now, I will say this. I have in the past, when I sold my property in Phoenix, Arizona, I actually got offers, higher than what I actually accepted, right? And so the reason I didn't take those higher offers was because of the strings attached to them. So I sold my property for $400,000. I actually had two other offers that were for $405,000, but they were FHA. Okay, so as you know, FHA has a lot more contingencies involved. There's inspections involved, etc. And I might have to go back and make repairs and do all this other stuff. Meanwhile, the $400,000, the lower offer, actually had no strings attached. It was all cash. They could close in 2 weeks. I didn't have to jump through any hoops. They could get everything done quickly, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a fair price, and I wanted no strings attached. Now, when you're dealing with this sort of Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, and you're dealing with nonprofit organizations and all this garbage, right? The only thing it is a whole bunch of strings attached. So you're going to have to jump through all these extra hoops. They might not even be paying you as high as the other offers are. You're going to have to wait a lot longer than a regular closing. Okay, standard, at least for all the states where I've ever invested and all the properties I've bought, it's standard to have a closing in 30 days. The longest closing time I've ever had on a property is 60 days. Okay, I mean, you might be able to extend it further than that, but these things can last much longer than that, and that's why it just doesn't work. Okay, so even landlords who want to sell to tenants, they're like, hey, I just can't deal with all of this nonsense and garbage. Okay, if you want to purchase it, you have to play by the exact same rules as everyone else. That means I open up the bidding on it. You put an offer in. If you win the offer and you're able to close, and compete with these other buyers, then yeah, you can have it. But that's the only way. I'm not going to do anything special for you, and I'm not going to sell it to you at a discount just because you already live here or because you're a charity. But efforts to pass TOPA on Beacon Hill have stalled, largely because landlord groups oppose the length of time the legislation would provide for community organizations to step in and raise money to buy the buildings. The most recent draft of the bill could allow 30 days for residents to make a bid for the property and then another 120 days to secure financing, meaning landlords would have to wait up to 5 months to close a sale. Yeah, that's a no-go, okay? Does not work. They have 30 days to make the bid. If I put my property on the market, the offer that I accept has 30 days to close, okay? But they have 30 days just to, let me think about it. And then they have another 4 months after that to actually get financing. This is a joke, okay? This is bad for landlords. And I hope this never passes, okay? Massachusetts landlords out there, I'm not going to say this will never pass, but, I will say that this is a very bad thing. And I don't want to see this sort of thing going on anywhere in the country, it sucks, okay? It just takes away our property rights. It makes it so that the tenants have more rights to your property and what you do with it than you do. And that's the sort of law that basically I absolutely hate, Plus it pushes more towards this socialist system, which I just don't agree with. So yeah. Oh man, I'm not going to read the rest of this article. You get the gist of it, okay? If you see any sort of law or rule that's similar to this and wherever you're at, fight it. That's the only thing I can suggest.